Why most people never notice when they fall behind. Most people don't wake up one day and realize they've fallen behind financially. There's no dramatic moment, no clear alarm, no sudden collapse. Instead, life keeps working. The paycheck arrives, the bills get paid, the routine continues. From the outside, everything looks fine, responsible, stable, adult. And that's exactly why the problem goes unnoticed. Because falling behind financially rarely feels like failure. It feels like normal life. Busy, demanding, slightly stressful, but manageable. The kind of life most people around you are living too. Years can pass like this. Decades, even. And only later, often much later, does the realization hit that progress quietly stalled while time kept moving forward. That's not an accident, and it's not about laziness, intelligence, or effort. It's about how falling behind actually happens. When people hear the phrase, falling behind financially, they often imagine something dramatic. Missed payments, mounting debt, a clear moment where everything starts to break. But for most people in the US and the UK, that's not how it happens. Falling behind rarely feels like failure. It feels like normal life. You have a job, you earn a steady income, the bills get paid on time, there's food in the fridge, maybe you even save or invest a little. From the outside, nothing looks wrong. In fact, it often looks responsible, stable, adult. And that's exactly why the problem goes unnoticed. For many working professionals, financial life becomes a cycle of maintenance. Income comes in, expenses go out, responsibilities are handled. There's just enough relief to avoid panic, but not enough margin to feel truly free. Time stays tightly tied to income, and income stays tied to showing up consistently. What makes this dangerous is that progress feels implied, even when it isn't real. A raise feels like moving forward. A better title feels like advancement. But underneath, flexibility doesn't increase. Options don't expand. Life simply becomes more expensive to maintain. This is how people fall behind without ever realizing it. Not by going backward, but by standing still while expectations, costs, and obligations quietly move forward. Years pass like this. Careers advance on paper. Life fills up. And because nothing ever breaks badly enough to demand attention, direction is never questioned. The assumption is that things will work themselves out over time. But falling behind isn't about collapse. It's about drift, and drift is hardest to see when everything still looks fine. The reason most people never notice when they're falling behind isn't a lack of intelligence or effort. It's the way financial progress is framed, rewarded, and felt in everyday life. From an early age, success is defined by stability, a steady job, a reliable paycheck, consistent routines. As long as nothing goes wrong, you're told you're doing fine. This trains people to measure progress by the absence of problems, not by the presence of flexibility. As a result, many financial decisions are reactive instead of strategic. When income increases, spending increases. When costs rise, people work harder. When pressure builds, they tell themselves they'll think long-term later. This creates constant motion, but very little direction. Another root cause is the slow nature of financial decline. Inflation doesn't feel dramatic month to month. Lifestyle upgrades don't feel risky one at a time. Career choices made for short-term safety don't feel limiting until years later. The cost of these decisions is delayed, which makes them easy to ignore. Psychology plays a major role as well. When life feels manageable, the brain prioritizes short-term certainty over long-term positioning. Planning 10 or 20 years ahead feels abstract compared to next month's bills. So investing, skill building, and structural changes are postponed, not because people don't care, but because urgency never spikes. There's also a misunderstanding of what progress actually looks like. Higher income is visible and socially reinforced. Structural strength is quiet. Reducing dependence, increasing optionality, and building leverage don't come with immediate feedback. Without obvious signals, people assume nothing is happening, even when they're slowly losing ground. None of this comes from bad intentions. It comes from following a system that rewards comfort today while quietly charging for it tomorrow. And because the cost arrives gradually, most people never notice the moment they fall behind. They only feel it years later, when change becomes harder. Avoiding falling behind doesn't require dramatic change. It requires a quieter shift in how decisions are made while life still feels manageable. The first step is moving from reactive thinking to directional thinking. Instead of asking, "Does this solve my problem right now?" a more useful question is, "Does this improve my position over time?" Position is about flexibility, resilience, and optionality, not comfort in the moment. This starts with awareness. You don't need a perfect plan, but you do need clarity about what your current structure depends on. How much of your lifestyle requires everything to keep working exactly as it is? How exposed are you to disruption? These questions aren't meant to create fear. They're meant to reveal where small adjustments would have the biggest long-term impact. Another practical shift is separating income from progress. Earning more helps, but only if that income is directed intentionally. Even modest surpluses can reduce future pressure when they're used to build skills that scale. Invest consistently, or lower fixed costs. The goal isn't to optimize every dollar, it's to make sure income is doing more than resetting the month. It also means resisting automatic lifestyle expansion, not eliminating enjoyment, but slowing upgrades that permanently raise your baseline. Each fixed expense increases the cost of flexibility. Delaying some comforts preserves room to adjust later, when options matter more than appearances. Most importantly, progress should be measured quietly. Less urgency, fewer decisions made under pressure, more room to pause before reacting. These aren't exciting milestones, but they're early signals that you're no longer drifting. The people who stop falling behind aren't the ones making bold moves. They're the ones making small, intentional decisions early enough that change still feels light. The real danger of falling behind isn't sudden collapse. It's gradual narrowing. When direction isn't questioned early, life slowly becomes more rigid. Income gets pre-committed. Time fills up with obligations that can't easily be adjusted. Decisions start to feel heavier, not because the stakes are dramatic, but because there's less room for error. Small disruptions create outsized stress, not because they're extreme, but because there's no margin to absorb them. This is how many people arrive in their late 30s or 40s feeling confused rather than defeated. On paper, they've done everything right. They worked consistently. They earned more over time. They stayed responsible. Yet flexibility feels limited. Career changes feel risky. Learning something new feels impractical. Even rest can feel uncomfortable because everything depends on momentum continuing. By contrast, when people begin paying attention earlier, the long-term experience looks different. Progress often feels slower at first. There's less visible reward, but pressure compounds in the opposite direction. Skills deepen. Assets grow quietly. Income becomes less fragile. Time begins to feel like something that can be allocated, not something that must be sold constantly. This is where consistency matters more than intensity. Financial stability isn't built through bursts of effort or perfect timing. It's built through small choices repeated long enough to change the structure of life. Choices that preserve flexibility instead of trading it away for short-term comfort. Over years, those decisions create a different kind of security. Not the security of predictability, but the security of adaptability. The ability to slow down without panic. To adjust direction without everything unraveling. To absorb uncertainty without fear. Most people never notice the moment they fall behind because the consequences arrive quietly. In the same way, real progress rarely announces itself. It shows up as lighter decisions, reduced urgency, and a future that feels less dependent on everything going exactly as planned. Most people don't suddenly realize they've fallen behind. There's no alarm, no clear failure, no single bad decision they can point to. Life keeps moving, responsibilities keep stacking, and because things are still working, even if just barely, deeper questions get postponed. That's why this conversation isn't about urgency or fear. It's about awareness. Falling behind financially doesn't mean you're irresponsible or incapable. In most cases, it means you stayed functional long enough that reflection felt optional. You did what was expected. You handled what was in front of you. You focused on keeping things running instead of asking where they were actually going. The good news is that direction can be adjusted at almost any stage. Not through dramatic resets or perfect plans, but through clearer questions. Questions about what your effort is really building, about how much of your future is already spoken for, about whether stability is creating flexibility or quietly removing it. Financial progress rarely comes from doing more. It comes from doing more intentionally, from noticing patterns before they harden into constraints, from choosing consistency over urgency, and direction over speed. There is no finish line where everything suddenly feels secure. Financial clarity is gradual. It forms through small decisions, repeated quietly, long before the results are obvious. And once it begins to form, it changes how work feels, how money feels, and how the future feels. So instead of asking whether you're ahead or behind, a better question might be this: do you feel like your current direction is expanding your options, or slowly narrowing them? And what's one area of your financial or career life that feels busy, but not truly progressive? Share your thoughts in the comments. That's often where awareness begins, and where better decisions quietly take shape.